How's it going, guys? Welcome to Hello All. My name is Devin, and this is the Hello All Podcast, the first official episode. I'm excited to bring this content to you guys. Hello All Podcast is essentially a podcast that covers most things pop culture. More specifically, it covers things based around comic books for the most part, but a lot of it is going to be film-related stuff as well as television, games, most things we can find that's pop culture related that I'm particularly interested in. Since this is the marquee episode of anything Hello All, but especially the podcast, we kind of have to do a little bit of housekeeping, so I hope you guys can bear with me with that. One thing I want to mention is that I'm in my living room. Obviously, this is going to be this type of casual situation where I discuss things based around comic and whatnot, but you're going to hear maybe they're building something across the street. I live across the street from a university. They're building like parts of the university or whatever, so you're probably going to hear some whistle blowing, maybe some construction. Just ignore that. I just want to introduce the channel to you guys as well as myself for anybody who may be here not knowing who I was previously or what I did previously. I do run a YouTube channel called Silent Stag. It's my main YouTube channel. Over there, we do a bunch of stuff that's basically film related as well as cinematic vlogs is what I've coined it, or what people have coined it in the past, and I've been adopting that term. But it's basically just vlogs with a little bit more extra effort put into them as far as editing goes. That channel has around 2,500 subscribers right now. And yeah, if you're interested in filmmaking content and all that kind of stuff and cinematic vlogs, then definitely head over there for that. But otherwise, this channel here is based on everything comic book related. So if you're interested in that type of stuff, this is where you want to be. Another thing to mention is that camera quality is usually a little bit better, but the webcam is what I'm using for this setup because I can use OBS and it makes it a little bit easier to do scene switches and all that stuff. Hello All itself is going to be a couple of series going on. We're going to try to do this podcast thing as frequently as possible. I'm hoping for weekly, but I'm not promising it. I do have a job, obviously, so things just can't be as you always want them to be, but this is what we're going to roll with for now. So this podcast, again, is going to be, I call it a podcast because it is all encompassing as far as like pop culture stuff goes. We're going to discuss news and all that stuff, and I'll give you guys a rundown in a second. But if you're here for comic book reviews, comic book hauls, this is going to be the place where you're going to see it here. I think I'm just going to take those videos, instead of spamming my account with videos, I'm going to condense that all down to one video. So we're going to have one main podcast video, which is going to be audio format as well as visual format, even though you're getting a little bit extra if you're watching the visual stuff. That's going to include reviews of things that I want to do, maybe even reactions to trailers that come out recently, comic book reviews, comic book hauls, my pull list for the next week, and all that cool stuff. So if you guys are interested in that kind of thing, just be sure to subscribe and stick around and you'll see this. And then the second type of video you're going to see is something that I'm going to tease for you guys here in a little bit. But it basically is going to be a video essay type videos, I guess you could say, surrounding things that are pertaining to pop culture. This first episode is going to be comic book related stuff, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So what we have on the list today is we're going to start off with some news for you guys. I'm actually going to have to pull this up now just to make sure we have it ready for you guys. But we're going to start with some news. I have DC, Marvel, and Image Comics news lined up for you guys to check out. So make sure you stick around for that. That's going to be the first segment. Second segment, we're going to get into the big chunk of it, which is going to be the comic book review stuff, where I show you guys what I picked up within the last couple weeks. And I give my quick thoughts or whatever, maybe even in-depth thoughts. It depends on what I thought about the comic, the writing, the art, etc. Lastly, we're going to go through my comic books that I'm going to be picking up for next week that you'll see in a future podcast if you guys are willing to stick around for that. Just to give you an idea, like a teaser of what's going to be coming up next week, and if we're going to be pulling up the same things from our pull list, or if you can expect to see me review something that you guys are also interested in or also watching. But as for now, I do want to show you guys the video that I'm going to be posting next after this one. It'll be posted within a week or so. I'm thinking maybe Wednesday or Thursday of next week, and this is being recorded on a Friday. So just make sure you guys stick around for that and subscribe for that. This is going to be a video essay style content. So let's just go ahead and take a look at it. Let you guys get a sneak peek, and then we'll hop back into this. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Okay, that analogy doesn't really work, nor was it particularly well written. But the point still stands. We all die, and we know it. So why is it so surprising when it happens to our favorite characters? Well, because they're like family. And no one wants to see their family die. Our families are side protagonists of our own stories. They're on this deceptive yet sometimes satisfying journey with us. And we're back. Okay, so now we're going into the new segment we're going to discuss in news. But I hope you guys enjoy the teaser. If you're interested in stuff like that, once again, just subscribe to make sure you guys see the content whenever it comes out. This is the sort of video you can see me making going forward. Obviously, it's going to be a lot longer. I think it's around the time of 10 minutes or so. But I like to incorporate a little bit of filmmaking type style into these video essays, just to differentiate it a little bit from what you see usually when you're on YouTube looking at video essays. Anyways, we're going to go into the news immediately. And our first news story is pertaining to DC. Ava DuVernay. I'm not tied to this website Deadline. I'm not even sure I've even heard of these guys, but they were the ones who I wouldn't say that broke the story, but they were one of the first ones to post it. So I'm definitely gonna give them credit there. But anyways, Ava DuVernay, if you guys know Ava DuVernay, she's a filmmaker, formerly a journalist, I believe, or even may currently still be a journalist, but she works as a director as well, and producer. She worked on A Wrinkle in Time, if you guys have seen that, as well as Selma, which is award nominated. I don't think it won though. As we all know, she was picked up to be the director as well as writer for the New Gods movie that DC is trying to bring to their new DC Universe film bracket, or whatever you call it, their film vertical. And she's going to be doing something that's really sick in my opinion, and that is to bring in Tom King from Warner Brothers DC's. And he's also worked on things such as Vision, you guys know that, as well as Mr. Miracle, which is the reason why they want to bring him in to sort of just help write the movie. It's going to be a co-written movie between those two. Personally, I find this pretty encouraging, knowing that sometimes it feels like the comic book community is a bit not protected, but like isolated, that it's not as mainstream, obviously, as games, for example, or movie or television. And it's really reassuring to know that a big name director such as Ava DuVernay knows who Tom King is and knows that Tom King has written some great stuff in Vision and in Mr. Miracle, and notices that. And I would presume that she read Mr. Miracle, and that's why, or maybe she was advised to pick him up, or someone told her about this. But I'm hopeful. I think that this is going to be an interesting development. I want to see how it goes forward. I want to see the casting. I want to see some plot points, some story going forward after they get this stuff. But this stuff is going to be way in the future. They haven't even started development. I mean, this is literally them starting just to write the story itself. So I'm excited to see where this goes. I think it's great for the comic book industry. Comic book movies are booming, and it doesn't seem like they're going to be slowing down anytime soon. So I just think it's very interesting that I'm just gonna take a sip of my iced coffee here. I just find it very interesting that people like Jeff Johns, people like Brian K. Vaughan, all these comic book writers are being recognized for being actual writers, because that's what they are, and they're getting their recognition as they deserve. And I'm excited to see him do something great with his movies. Now, I want to discuss some of the controversy surrounding this film itself. There's a couple points here that people are ragging on in general that, it's kind of not necessarily disappointing, but can put a damper on the news itself. You got to think about this. Number one, DC has always been in the shadow of Marvel. Not always, but, during the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight era was the peak of DC films. Even when you go back to the old Batman films, the old Superman television shows, those are all great things. But as of late, it's been in the shadow of Marvel. Everything that Marvel has done, DC has sort of followed up on, and even if they were in development first, it seems like Marvel somehow does it better, or does it before they can. and they haven't been in the best of positions. And I'm sorry if you guys are hearing the air conditioner. I should probably turn that off. They haven't been in the best of positions when it comes to releasing films in general. So they haven't had the best reputation when it comes to that type of stuff, especially with comic book fans, and even the general public. So I'm hoping that this is going to be another Wonder Woman or another Aquaman, or hell, even another Shazam, as far as like fan reception versus box office, because we know Shazam didn't perform well in terms of box office, but the fan reception was pretty good. I know a lot of comic book heads like enjoyed Shazam for the most part. So it's reassuring to see them picking up their pace and doing the right things. But I'm just hoping that we can see them be able to tap into the mainstream audience. Which brings us to another point, is that people feel as if Tom King, I've been going around the forums watching videos, people feel as Tom King as well as Avery DuVernay are very niche content creators. They make things that are specifically for certain groups of people, and it doesn't really translate well when it goes to mainstream audiences, which is what you need to make something like this successful, because we can imagine this will be a fairly big budget, and it needs to make its money back in order to continue to succeed, and we need that to happen for the DC film universe. So hopefully this will be a good thing. I'm excited for it because I think they're both creatives that deserve this, and I think they do have the ability to do well. It just depends on which Avery DuVernay and which Tom King shows up in the writing room every day as they're plotting this thing together. People are giving Avery DuVernay a hard time because of her last film, which didn't perform very well at all, Wrinkle in Time. Some people were upset about the race bending. Some people were upset about it being an important film, but not necessarily an entertaining film. And she seems to have a hard time, or at least from her last film, she seems to have a hard time balancing the two, as far as like making it important, making it an awesome message, but then also making it a great experience for the moviegoers. So I'm hoping that she can pull that together, but again, only time will tell. Tom King has not necessarily a similar issue, but people are saying that he's fallen off, especially with the after Batman, 50, whenever Catwoman wedding fell through, or like he did that weird twist that nobody expected by not having them married. And people hated that, and then going forward from that issue on, people were really reluctant to read his stuff, and a lot of people dropped his stuff, and the reoccurring purchases of the Tom King's Batman issues went down. I don't know, like 30 or 40K, which is still much higher than most of the average books. But if you want to have that titan within comic books, you got to have them selling over 100K. In terms of like mainstream Batman, Superman type stuff, which is what you would expect from namestays like that. But people are pretty salty about Tom King's recent developments as a writer. I personally feel that Tom King has earned like multiple buffers for his Vision work, for his Miracle Man work, and even his Batman run, which I'm currently reading after picking up from issue 70 and onward. I think he's a very unique writer. I think a lot of his stuff is poetic in a lot of ways. He writes. He almost has a film-like dialogue to his writing and description as well. So I'm excited to see if he can transition or translate his writing from comic book-based stuff to film and make it actually work. So hopefully. Yeah, that's all I really have for this news. I'm looking forward to it. I'm a huge DC fan. Obviously, I'm hardly picking up any Marvel comics. Not because I'm biased or anything like that. I don't think. I just the content to me isn't as high quality, and the stories aren't as interesting in my opinion. That seems to be a recurrent theme with me. Anyways, let's move on to Marvel news, which is, you guys have probably seen the teaser above there, and that is that. Let me actually switch over to a better display for you guys. Here we go. That is that the Marvel's Avengers game is going to be revealed at E3. So if you guys aren't familiar with E3, E3 is this expo that happens every year in the month of June, where gamers and game developers and game content creators, game streamers, everything involving the game world comes together in this huge event, and they watch a bunch of press conferences and play a bunch of demos and reveal a bunch of new awesome games for fans to relish over and to experience for the year to come until June, until the next year comes around. Usually most games release, I would say 78% of those games release within that time period. A lot of them don't, not a lot of them, sorry, I just contradicted myself. A number of them, much less than what I mentioned previously, don't release until years later, or they're being teased years in advance, which is something that's becoming much more popular for game developers to do. But this is exciting news because this is something that, if you guys follow the game community, which I do, I don't game as much as I would like to anymore, just because I guess life getting more mature sucks because you got to do work and stuff like that. You can't game as much, but I'm excited for this, and like I was going to mention, I follow the entire gaming scene. I'm always following a bunch of gaming guys on Twitter. Greg Miller, is it Greg over Game over Greg, whatever his Twitter handles at. Kind of Funny Games, IGN, GameSpot, things like that. I follow all those guys, and I know I'm on the inside scoop as far as like game content goes, and this is something that they've been mentioning for, I would say, about a year now, maybe even longer, at least for, just to be safe, at least months. They've been mentioning this, that the Avengers game will be made by either Square Enix, I think it was, or Rockstar. They were like speculating rumors and all that stuff, and it looks like it's actually going to happen. So it looks like it's going to be happening during the Square Enix E3 2019 press conference, which they're mentioning here. And as mentioned before, this press conference does take place in June. We're about a week and a half away, maybe 2 weeks away from the press conference happening, which feels weird because if you guys are big gamers, you know there's usually a really huge hype around, and maybe it's just me, there's huge hype around E3. E3 has been sort of slowly like melting away, not to where I think it would die off, but like it's becoming a different type of E3 because of the fact that E3 used to be this huge press conference where all the journalists, all the content creators, yes, but also like all the people who create the games, the developers, can go and showcase their content and then report on their earnings and all that stuff and get everyone hyped for their games, and it'd be like a huge promotion. Well, now we have the internet. The internet's prevalent. Everyone's following Nintendo and Square Enix and Ubisoft and Sony and Microsoft on their social medias. You can release a Twitter video and immediately everyone will see it. So E3 sort of seems like a thing of the past as far as like going physically somewhere and having a press conference, but a lot of people like to stick to the tradition. They still bring their games there to demo because you can get hands-on, which is something that you can't do without releasing an actual game into the ether of people. So I think E3 is beneficial. I would like to see it stick around. Hopefully, people like Sony, for example, or companies like Sony, for example, have pulled out of E3 and said they'll hold their own press conferences. Nintendo doesn't even do a press conference anymore. They do like a Nintendo Treehouse, which is their own little thing, even though I think it is hosted at E3. So if you buy tickets, you can see it in person. Otherwise, you have to watch it live stream on their actual official channel. But I'm excited. I don't think this video is much of anything. I'm excited to see. Yeah, that's just their teaser thing they're doing. I'm excited to see what this Avengers game is going to be. Think about an Avengers game where you have all these different characters. I'm not sure if it's going to be like Avengers Alliance, which is something that's coming out on the Nintendo Switch soon, where it's like an RPG where you can be any Marvel character, and then like a beat 'em up type of thing, or an ARPG type of thing, or if it's going to be actually a story mode where you can be one particular character, or maybe multiple, and you get to go through a linear story mode or even open world story mode, like a Spider-Man game, for example, and experience that. So I'm interested. I want to see what it's going to end up being. Hopefully it comes to PC so I can actually play it. And last, in terms of news, is that the writer Chip, I don't even want to try to say his last name. I guess I will. Zdarsky. I think the Z is silent. Zdarsky, who wrote Daredevil, which is a run that I didn't hop on, but I heard a lot of good things about. And the artists from Runaways, Chris Anka and Matt Wilson, are going to be writing a new book, which looks pretty interesting. If you guys know me, you know that I'm a huge sci-fi guy and not much of a fantasy guy. I think Saga does a good job of mixing the two, which actually helped me like fantasy a little bit more. But I'm not huge on fantasy, and the plot doesn't sound too intriguing here. But you know what? Is this coming out of Portland, Oregon? I've heard a lot of comic book people are from Portland. Interesting. which sounds like the place to be. But anyways, yeah, I like the art. I like the art from Runaways. I've never gotten into Runaways. Um, I want to read the Brian K. Vaughan things. I'm a huge Brian K. Vaughan fan. I want to read his run, but I've never gotten to the recent one. But I've heard it's really good, and I've seen the art, and I actually do love the art from that stuff. So that'd be one reason to pick it up. Other than that, I'm not too impressed. Here's some of the art. I'm telling you, it's just sick stuff. But other than that, the story itself doesn't really intrigue me. Once again, the fantasy stuff to me is just a tad bit boring. Like, I was never a Lord of the Rings fan or anything like that, or the Hobbit fan. So it's hard for me to get into this stuff. When growing up, I just was never really into it. But hopefully you guys get something out of it for sure. And we're back. Take another sip of my coffee here. All right, now we're going to go into the book reviews. I was supposed to tease this early on, and maybe I'll have to edit it and post. We'll see. Of the books that I'm going to be covering, I am going to do my pick of the week type situation, which is going to be hard because none of these books really blew me away. So you guys are going to see a little bit of some Jeff Lemire, some Tom King, Invisible Kingdom stuff, as well as a little bit of Superman. Obviously, Leviathan Rising came out, and we need to cover that for sure. I'm going to start with what I would consider the most controversial book itself, which would be Invisible Kingdom. So I have issue 1 somewhere like around here, but these are the ones I picked up within the last couple weeks or so. A couple weeks? Yeah, it has to be a couple weeks, I think. Is it? Oh, whatever. It comes out every couple weeks, doesn't it? Anyways, this book itself, I've discussed this with a couple other people, like on the internet, through Twitter and through YouTube and all that stuff, is a book that I'm really conflicted about because I want to like it so bad. I really want to like it. I think the art from Christian Ward is really, really nice. Though sometimes I find it to be a bit inconsistent. I think the art itself is nice art. Some of the character design, in my opinion, is questionable. Some choices are made in terms of, like, I don't know, character design itself that I personally wouldn't want to. I don't know. Just some of the character design I'm just not a fan of. I think the biggest issue is that most of these characters, especially within the first 2 issues, in my opinion, were sort of the same, had the same vibe to them, which makes sense. You have to have some coherence there in terms of characters, but they seem sort of samey to me, which gives me a hard time being involved in these characters' lives, really being invested in who these characters are, caring even, and they're not very memorable in my opinion, which is one of the issues I have with the book as well. So this book just doesn't wow me. There's nothing to really intrigue me. There's nothing that the plot itself is sort of underwhelming. I'm not sure where it's headed. Honestly, a lot of the things that we've seen within this book, it feels like it's been wrapped up already, and it seems like it'll be, I don't know, I've actually heard that it's maybe like a short, like 6-issue series, to see how it does, and then they're going to bring it back, which would explain a lot of things. I just feel like the idea itself feels like it's much grander than what we're seeing, and things are being rushed and wrapped up in not optimal ways, I would say. There's a storyline in particular where, and of course, this being a 6-issue thing, rumored to be a 6-issue story arc, sort of solidifies my opinion here, that the fact that some of these storylines are wrapping up within an issue or so, not even halfway throughout the second issue. One of the storylines from the first issue, which I thought would be something that would be dragged over the entire 6-issue arc, was already resolved, which was the fact that the Vis, I think her name is Vis, is a lady who came from another land, walked across multiple lands to get to this monastery, barefoot and blinded, and then joined this sort of monastery religion cult, monastery, whatever you want to call it, to follow their religion. And she ends up, this is a spoiler by the way, you guys should know that. She ends up discovering that the lead lady who is sort of like the leader of this entire cult or religion or whatever, has been secretly pocketing money from Lux, which is something that they're anti-Lux, because Lux is like a, people have compared it to Amazon. It's very consumerism type culture where they sell a bunch of things and they want you to buy a bunch of things, and your life's based around material things if you're buying things from Lux or whatever. And yeah, I think that once she revealed that storyline, I thought it would have been something that would sort of be like an underlying storyline throughout the entire story itself, but it wrapped up within the second issue, and it wrapped up in a very weird way where Vis was sort of told that she was being tested, that with the information she found within her computers revealing that the main lady was actually pocketing money from Lux, which she's anti-Lux, and their religion is anti-Lux, which is the entire purpose of the religion, to be anti-materialism, that she was pocketing that money, that she planted that idea there so that she can find it in, and it was a test to see if she would pass it, and obviously she failed, which I thought was a weird excuse for it. I would have much rather it actually been something that would carried on throughout the entire 6-issue arc, and we would slowly discover like who this lady is, and that she has these deep dark secrets. And I think that still may be the case, because she could have possibly been lying to her, but I think I can only go off of what I see, and I think that it could have gone much further than what it actually did. So they wrapped it up within an issue and a half, which is something I didn't enjoy. And I can go on and on. The characters themselves are sort of, some of them are pretty typical. The main character, who I believe is a woman, she is like the gritty, like tough girl type thing, where she doesn't really take anything from anyone. She makes all the decisions. She's the leader. It's just very typical in my opinion. I don't know, just this story, just the best way to say it is that a lot of the plot points either wrap up in a very uneventful way, wrap up way too quickly, or they don't really amount to anything. There's really nothing there that they're trying to say, I feel like. You can argue that there's commentary on consumerism culture, which is, I guess, something good to mention, but I'm just not really impressed by how it's being told. I think the art's awesome. The dialogue obviously is I would say standard. Nothing too impressive about it, but it just isn't anything that's wowing me. And knowing that this is going to be like a 5 to 6 issue story arc, I'm going to finish it out, and hopefully it improves to where I want to pick it up. But again, this is one of those things where I really want to enjoy this book, but I'm just having a really hard time doing it. So hopefully it picks up within the next 2 or 3 issues until it's supposedly supposed to end. So let me check my notes and see if there's anything else that I said about this. Yeah, I'm just saying that I was entirely underwhelmed. The characters don't seem to offer much. Grix is your typical too tough for their own good type of protagonist, and Vis is a young, naive side protagonist. There seems to be no payoff with the storylines yet. In fact, the cliffhanger in the first issue is what really kept me around, which is true, other than the art. And then at half an issue later, they wrapped up the storyline, which is what I just told you guys before. So yeah, usually whenever I'm looking for a book to read, I'll, like most people, pick up the first issue and see how that goes for me. If you can reel me in the first issue, like really reel me in, then I'm good for the entire arc. If I'm on the fence about it and I'm sort of like, I like the art, we'll see about it, I'll by default pick up the next 2 issues just to see if the writer and the artist warm up to each other, the writer warms up to its characters, and to see if it improves or if it goes anywhere very interesting, any crazy twists. And if you get me past issue 3, then I'm on for like the rest of the run. If you get me really locked in at issue 1, I'm on for the rest of the run. But if you don't get me locked in at issue 1, I'm dropping it immediately at issue 1. And if those next 2 issues aren't great after you've sort of locked me into issue 1, I'm dropping it at issue 3. This is one of those situations where, again, I'm desperate to really like this because the art's good. I was told that this would be a really, I don't want to put the blame on anyone. I'm not blaming anyone because this is my choice. I have the choice to buy this, but I've been sort of persuaded that this will be a good run. And I'm hoping that it will be, but I've yet to see anything spectacular or anything really interesting about this, besides a few plot points in the art itself. So we'll see if it picks up. Hopefully it does. I do want to like this, but again, like, it's just a matter of time, I guess, until we figure out if I do. Like I said, I'm going to pick up the rest of the arc if it is 5 to 6 issues. But beyond that, I don't know. We'll see. So the next book I want to talk about actually is Ascender, which this is the second issue that I have here, which came out, I think, last week. Maybe this week. I'm pretty sure last week, I think. 1 second. And I'm sorry if I'm like rambling too much. For a second there, I actually had a really weird like outer body experience where when I was speaking about the first issue, when I was speaking about the Invisible Kingdom stuff, I was sort of thinking what I wanted to say, and I felt like my brain was moving really slowly and I couldn't put together the words. I was kind of stumbling over myself, and I guess as I podcast more, I'll get more used to it. But I've been making videos for years, and that was the first time something like that happened to me. That was really weird. But yeah, this is a book by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. Dustin Nguyen's art is really awesome. He does, that's going to be a reoccurring theme with most of the books I pick up, because art is like a huge driving factor. He does a lot of watercolor stuff. So you see a lot of his line art is very sketchy. Not necessarily even sketchy. It's not the cleanest line art. It's not like a typical, like a superhero book line art. Excuse me, sorry. Much more indie book oriented, it feels like. But a lot of his stuff is like the lines are there just sort of to piece things together, if you guys can see that, hopefully. The lines are there sort of just to piece things together, just to hold it in place. And then I hope this isn't spoilers for you guys. Actually, I already told you spoiler warning a long time ago. So the lines are there just to hold things in place. And then the colors is really what pulls it together. You see this tower here? That's a really good example. You guys can hardly see it on here, but a lot of it's just painted into place, and it takes form after that. And I just sort of like that vibe. It isn't too, it doesn't feel like he's trying too hard. It feels like he just draws what he feels. There's a lot of emotion in this. It feels like a lot less technique and much more emotion, which is something that I appreciate in books like this. But anyways, I don't know why I put it back in the bag here, but Descender was a book that I really wanted to get into. One for the art, two for Jeff Lemire. He always seems to tell really good indie stories. And yeah, I was interested in getting into that. I never actually got into it, and it was way too far along by the time I actually got a wind of it. So I didn't get to read Descender, but once I heard Ascender was coming around, I had to hop on that and see if I would like it. And just like I mentioned before with Invisible Kingdom, how, if you get me in on issue 1, I'm good for the next 2 issues. If you get me by issue 3, I'm good for the rest of the arc. And this is something that's going to have me for the rest of the arc. I can tell it's a completely different story than I expected after looking at the sort of I don't want to call it tabloids, but like the front page of Image Comics, for example, the website, whenever they would mention that this book is coming and what it means for Jeff Lemire and all that stuff. The hype for it, essentially. It's a much different book than what I expected. This is another book I think handles fantasy and science fiction well. It takes sort of like, there's like essentially, I can't really explain the plot too well because I'm not really familiar with Descender, but it seems to be, there's this lady who's called Mother, and she's like a witch almost. She can do different type of magical witch powers, and she's trying to essentially destroy everything that is like science fiction. So like robots, guns, ships, anything that's made out of metal and electronics, she's trying to get rid of, because it seems like she wants to have just a fantasy world through and through. Main reason being because she can rule that world, because she seems to be the strongest being out of all the people. And of course, technology gives people much power. So as far as like the motivation behind that, there's not much beyond that, but that's actually, honestly, that motivation is much more motivation than what I've gotten out of Invincible Kingdom. That mother wants to, she wants to be on top of the world. She wants to continue to rule. And the way she does that is she inhibits people from using technology that could possibly take her out. And it puts this sort of like dictatorship vibe within the book. People are living in villages. They're being watched over. They're being watched constantly. They essentially don't have much freedom in terms of like owning anything that's, cybernetic or science fiction related. So we've seen this issue where the main character's father is reunited with the dog, which you see on the front of the book. It's a robot dog. And then immediately these her soldiers, mother's soldiers, come to this guy's house and starts to attack them, and they have to eventually kill those guys as much as they can and then run away. I'm not sure where this book's going to go in terms of story for the main character. She seems so far, and this is not a good thing, but hopefully she has a bit more agency later on, but she seems to be like a passive character within the book, to where she has no agency. She doesn't really influence much of anything. There's one exception to that rule, which is toward the end of the book when the father's in danger, and she actually does save her father by pricking this guy in the chest. And of course, this is only 2 issues in, so the statements I make are malleable. It's not really set in stone, and I'm sure it's going to improve going this point forward, because she's done something that really didn't see coming, really didn't expect to happen. That does give her tons of agency, because she just took out one of these minions, who seems to be like one of the lieutenant guys, like the bigger, higher name type of guys, not just a grunt, but like an actual namestay in terms of like Mother's army. So she took that guy out, which was really exciting to see, and I'm excited to see where the story goes. Of course, I don't know what to expect at all, because I didn't read Descender or any of these solicits or anything, so I have no clue what's happening with Cinder. I'm just enjoying the ride as I go along. The writing's good, the dialogue's good, the art is fantastic. I think I really like the watercolor look. I think it adds a different dynamic to the book versus like typical, standard coloring, which is also awesome stuff, but it just gives you a different vibe to it. So looking forward to seeing where that goes. And yeah, if you guys are reading that, let me know. Man, you know what? I haven't talked comics in forever, guys. So this is sort of awkward for me. Hopefully I'm doing a good job. Got to get back into the swing of things. I think next we're going to go into Batman. So this is Tom King's Batman. I picked up issues 70 and 71 and 72, or 70 and 71, whatever it is that starts the newest arc that we're on. Yeah, it had to be 70 and 71. I'm completely lost, guys. I have no clue what's going on, but one thing I can say, I wrote a couple notes here. I wrote that Tom King's writing is poetic. There's realism within the dialogue, and I truly do feel this. I think he's a different type of writer, like I mentioned before. I think a lot of his storytelling isn't... Actually, did I say this? Let me see. Yeah, it's never straightforward exposition. He's not telling you what is happening and why it's happening. You don't go through life being told what is happening and why it's happening. You go through life experiencing it. And I feel like Tom King helps us experience what, for example, Batman and all the other characters involved are going through. Here we go. Experience emotions for the sake of the character and not to add to the story only. So it's not always about story for this guy. A lot of it has to do with character development. He makes you feel like you actually know these characters. And there's a lot of things going on with Batman. Batman seems to be sort of going insane almost. Like I said before, I just started picking this up at issue 70, so I'm not sure if anything happened previously to this that would cause this, I would imagine. But I know we're coming up on this Bane arc, and there's Bane in this book as well. He seems to be controlling the city to a certain extent. A lot of the villains are attacking Batman, But we have this very interesting duo between the artists, where one artist sort of reminds me of Miracle Man's art a little bit, where it's the lines are much less clean, much less connected. There's a bunch of spaces between the line and line art and all that stuff, and it's just much more emotion to that one. And then the second guy, whose art is really amazing in my opinion, I would argue better than the other guy I mentioned. He does a lot of clean stuff, a lot of deep saturated colors, a lot of darks. I'm not sure if he colors his own stuff, but the colorist is doing a good job with that. But a lot of his stuff is just perfect form. It's very complex. It's not as simple as the other guys. And it's interesting because you can tell which story or which sort of Batman we're seeing, or which story of Batman. Seems like there's two stories going on side to side, but we're seeing which Batman story we're actually reading based on which art we're seeing. So that's an interesting dynamic. I was reading this book before. This is one of my favorite books as a kid. It's a young adult novel called Legend by Marie Lu, who's one of my favorite writers, because as a kid I read her books and that really got me into her. But she wrote this book called Legend. And in that book, it was sort of like a dual perspective, where we had one girl who was like a military girl who really followed the rules. Her name was June. And then a guy who was sort of rebel. His name was Day. And she would alternate between the two perspectives within that book based on the character, right? So we'll see one character in one chapter and then the next character in the next. It seems like we're sort of experiencing something like that right now, where Batman's having sort of the split personality thing. And I'm pretty sure the timelines aren't, side by side, parallel to one another right now. It seems like maybe one's in the past and one's in the future, or one's in his head. I don't know. It's really hard to tell. But we go from one scene to the next, and like a couple pages of one guy's art and a couple pages of the next guy's art, and they're telling two different stories, and Batman's contradicting himself. At one point, Batman goes to Arkham to confront Bane, and he goes there, and Arkham's completely fine, even though he just told, Batgirl and Robin and all them before, once they teamed up on that rooftop, that they were going to go stop Bane from doing the things he's doing at Arkham. And they go there, and everything's completely fine. And then we see the next scene where Bane's actually at the Wayne's building house, or whatever you call it, the mansion, Wayne's mansion, and Batman's there, and he's fighting Bane, and Alfred's there serving Bane. Bane just has complete control, and Alfred even tells Batman that Bane is won. You've been defeated. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on in the story. I'm going to have to keep reading to figure out, obviously. But it seems that Batman's going through a hard time. Maybe there's a split personality thing going on. Maybe Batman is broken and beaten. Maybe, I don't know. There could be a lot of things going on here. I just know that I'm enjoying Tom King's writing. And I just need to continue to read so I can have a good explanation of what's going on in Batman's story here. So yeah, like I said, I was joined in on 70, so there's not much for me to go off of. I just know that Bane's taking over things and Batman's having a hard time coping with that. So yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm going to stick with the Batman run for the foreseeable future. And we know there's a new creative team coming soon. I'm not sure who it is going to be exactly, but Tom King is going to write Batman and Catwoman. So, yeah, we'll see about that. I wonder how that's going to go. It's funny and almost ironic that he's going to be writing that book, considering what he did at issue 50 with the wedding and all that stuff. So I wonder how that's going to be accepted in the community. So funny enough, I actually picked up Action Comics 1007, hoping to catch up, because this is Leviathan Rising Part 1. Hoping to catch up. We're not going to talk about this. I do love the covers for these. I think the artist inside actually does the covers as well. He does more of a painterly type feel to the covers, and he actually does standard coloring on the inside. But we're not going to talk about that because I actually picked up the Leviathan Rising #1, and I'm not sure if this is actually the book itself, or if it is just a tie-in, or the beginning of the story, for example, with the Superman book. But this is a huge 84 issue book here, and it almost feels like a mini trade. It's like, I wouldn't say hardbound or anything like that, but there's like a cardboard type front to it, much harder than the other covers we get, and much more stiff, much more crazy quality. This cost me $10 to have to purchase, so yeah, it better be 84 pages with like cardstock cover and all that stuff. We get like four different, technically I think three or four different stories. One of them is told by Bendis. The first and last story is told by Bendis. The I think Matt Fraction wrote the Jimmy Olsen story, and then I think Greg Rucka wrote the story where it's more like a mystery story with Lois Lane. So this was interesting to see. I'm not sure exactly how I feel in total about collaboration issues like this, where the prices is just much higher. Some of the stories don't seem as relevant or as like dire as some of them do. But again, like I'm hopping back into this thing, back into my comic book collecting, comic book reading, all that stuff, and I'm excited just to have something to read, something that's relevant that people are going to be talking about, so I can join the discussion as well. But as far as like Leviathan Rising, I honestly don't, like I said, I just started picking this up. I don't know exactly what all this is coming from. There's a lot of things that I was picking up Superman and Action Comics when they first rebooted with Bendis, and I stopped maybe a month out or something, or not a month out, but yeah, a month from when I started. So I got maybe 4 or 5 or 6 issues into both books, and there's a lot of plot points and story development that has happened since then that is surprising to me, because these things weren't revealed. They were sort of mysteries when I first started reading. Like, what's her name? The good girl, the reporter girl. I want to say Megan Good, but something Good. She's one of the villains who was in the first arc of the story that wasn't really revealed to us. So that's interesting to see, that sort of development with that character. In this book, we get to see who we believe to be Leviathan. He comes in the form, or he claims to be Leviathan. He comes in the form of a human body, like a regular like person's body. Even though later in the issue we see him in a complete costume and all that stuff. So he uses this technology from the DEO, he claims, that can sort of hide your face. And he speaks with this lady who is supposed to be this, I would assume, a billionaire like mind behind everything that occurs within the city. And she's said to be controlling a lot of things. She's said to be pulling the strings sort of behind the scenes. So it's interesting to see her out there shopping, and then Leviathan, who we presume to be Leviathan, confronts her and tells her what his plans are, which is pretty vague as well. We're not really sure about that either, or what her plans are. They're not super clear about it, but that's the mystery. This is set to change the DC universe in some ways to affect the entirety of the DC universe. So I'm interested to see where that's going to go. But as far as this book goes, I mean, I had nothing against Bendis's writing or Fraction's writing or Rucka's writing. I thought they all did a solid job. Actually, Fraction was the one that probably impressed me the most. When I looked at this looked super, I want to say Silver Age to me. Simple colors, not a lot of shadows. Actually, I wouldn't say any shadow. Oh, am I supposed to show that? Oh, sorry. Don't know if I'm allowed to show that or not. Like, YouTube and their new thing. I don't know. I mean, this is his new channel, so it's not monetized. So hopefully, like, it doesn't get taken down or something like that. But yeah, a lot of it's like a really old style art where it's just simple line art. All the lines are even. There's no tapering on any of the lines, and all the colors are flats. There seems to be no shadows or highlights. Not much of them anyway. So it's just interesting to see. This Jimmy Olsen story is about Jimmy Olsen going to, I think it's Gorilla City, and he gets drunk and he ends up marrying a superhero lady, and then he gets left alone. He deals with a crazy cat, and it ties into the first story, which makes it better. But a lot of it was just really funny writing and like crazy Jimmy Olsen adventures. A kid who has no powers and not much agency in the grand scheme of things, but plays a small role in it all the same. So I really liked Faction's writing in that. I thought he's fairly funny. Some of the lines were corny, I would admit, but none of it was too offensive. I don't think so. And the story itself was pretty funny. And it's funny because this is supposed to be, both of these issues written by Rucka and Faction are supposed to be like the entries into their own little series within the Superman universe. So I'm interested to see where he goes with this. I'm just not sure if it's something I want to pick up. It's a fun read. It was better than I expected, but I'm not sure if it's something that I want to go forward with. Like, it's just not, I don't know. It reminds me a bit of Archie Comics, which is fine, but it just seems sort of insignificant. It doesn't really add much value to the story, I believe. But it may in the later issues. Who knows? We'll see. In the Bendis run, we see that Bendis' Superman is going off of what I mentioned earlier with the billionaire lady who's like behind the strings, behind the scene, pulling all the strings for all this stuff. Superman allows himself to be kidnapped as Clark Kent because of people kidnapping him, who will be Tala al Ghul and all her minions. Don't know that Clark Kent is Superman, but they kidnap him anyways, and then they use kryptonite to bait Superman out. So they use Clark Kent to bait Superman out, and they use kryptonite to weaken Superman once he approaches Clark Kent to save him, because they think that Clark Kent and him have a tie and they want to capture Superman. Little do they know that they actually have Superman. So I thought it was a pretty clever way to tell that type of story, or that at least that plot point. But I don't really think that it amounts to much. Just they don't explain why they want Superman. They don't explain what Tala al Ghul wanted with Superman, or it seems that she's working for Leviathan, but they're not really clear, at least to me, having not read any of the previous installments of the Leviathan storyline. They're not clear to me what exactly Leviathan's looking for, what he's after. So that is something that hopefully going forward they'll explain and it be worth it. I'm excited for the entire event type situation. I'm hoping that, and people are speculating that out of this we're going to get like a DC Rebirth, New 52 type situation, which will be interesting. We'll see. There's already some number ones coming out of this book itself, so we'll see if that actually that adds to it. One thing I found interesting is that Clark Kent, or Superman, is always listening for Lois Lane's name. So every time they hear her name, he's listening to where he'll be able to hear it in any kind of issues pertaining to Lois Lane he can solve. And this probably goes back to her storyline before I even started reading this thing, but it seems that Lois Lane's in a hotel and she's hiding out somewhere for some reason. She's working on some work, and again, this billionaire lady never wants to mention these key words that involve Superman, like Lois Lane's name, because if she says it, then they'll hear it. Superman will hear it, and he'll come approach you and then find out where you are. And she's not supposed to be anyone who's like in the public eye or whatever. So that's also an interesting aspect about the story. There's not much more I can say. This is the first issue. Like I said, solid writing from all the guys. Some of the story never really fleshes out, which is what you expect in the first issue, but it's just enough there to keep you teased, to keep you interested in what's going on. Even Superman within the stories, like asking some of the characters, what does Leviathan want? Why is Leviathan a thing? What is this all about? And he's just as confused as we are. So it feels like a lot of this stuff I don't even have a right to review, because I honestly don't have much clue what's going on in any of the stories. Either the story themselves are told in a very vague way, or I've missed arcs from before that don't really that would explain a lot to me that I'm just not aware of because I haven't read those stories. So there's not really much more I can say in terms of like story or whatever. I can just say that most of these comics I thought were pretty okay. Some of them I'm enjoyed. Invisible Kingdom is something that needs a lot of work in my opinion. I'm ready for it to not wrap up, but to actually tell me something, because I'm interested in seeing where this goes. Again, it's something I really want to like, but just haven't had the chance to. So yeah, those are my pickups for the week, guys. We're about to go into what my pull list is for next week, but then we're gonna go. But first, we're gonna go into what my pick of the week is, which will be Ascenders. Excuse me. Jeff Lemire is always solid. Dustin Nguyen's art is spectacular as always. And the story itself is just a solid story. Even though, like I said before, I haven't read Descenders, this feels like the most complete of a story within one comic than any of the other stories that have been told. So, I don't know. There's a lot to look forward to this. This will be my pick of the week. And yeah, we'll see what happens next week. Speaking of next week, let's go into what we're getting next week. And then we'll close out the show. I'm sorry if you guys don't like to see what well, I'm pretty sure you do. I was gonna say some people like to be surprised what's coming out the week after. I used to be that way. I used to like going to the shop and like, oh, what's out this week, and add it to my list and all that stuff. But anyways, I want to go through what we see here, and then that's weird, and then discuss these books and discuss what I'm picking up and why I'm picking it up. Adventures of the Super Sons. So I am not picking this up. I've heard that this book is not doing too hot in terms of storytelling. I think Gleason was the artist on the first Super Sons that Tomasi was writing, which was an awesome combination. I've heard great things about the first installment of this series. It was for some reason put on the back burner, and then I brought it back into this weird I don't know, reboot or whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure why they did that. It's literally the same characters, same writer and all that stuff. I think the same artist was on it for the first arc or whatever. So I'm not sure why they chose to do that. It's a weird choice in my opinion, but I think it dropped a lot of momentum for the book, and I think people aren't as interested in it as they were before. So I am not picking that up. As you guys saw earlier, I actually picked up Batman 70 and 71. So obviously, naturally, I'm going to go into 72 to see what happens. This is part 3. So Bane's army of villains is taking over the city, and Batman's back is against a wall. So we're going to do some more stuff pertaining to Batman and then Bane. Let's see what's going on with the gallery here. No, nothing. Yeah, not much to say about this. Just more Batman, more Tom King. Excited about that. Batman, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, and Batman, like a crossover, or whatever. I'm not picking these up. These are always fun in my opinion. I used to like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when I was a kid. I had like the toys and stuff like that, but I've never been huge into those guys. I was a Donatello fan for sure, but as far as comics go, I've never really been into those things. So we have some graphic novels coming out, like The Blackest Night. I'm not picking that up. Deceased, which is a big, I think is this DC Black label stuff? I think it is. I don't know. I've heard it's like Marvel Zombies, but with DC characters. So we'll see how that is. I'm not picking that up as well, or either. So, not very interested in that story either. There's a lot of things I'm not picking up, guys, so don't be surprised. Deathstroke Rip. Not a huge Deathstroke fan. Excited to see him in the new Batman movie, but not a huge fan. Female Furies. It looks like Big Bird there, but haven't really read anything about that either, so not into that. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn's one of my favorite sort of like villain characters, but her run hasn't really been intriguing me much, so I'm not gonna pick that up. I haven't heard great things about it. I don't know many people reading that either. We're just gonna skip the graphic novels, go straight to the books. Justice League. Justice League was a book that I was picking up. I like Snyder a lot. He's a fun writer in my opinion. I know a lot of people are on the fence about him. He's usually 50-50. He's sort of like a Tom King type character where everyone knows him and you either hate it or love his writing. The artist on here, man, I follow him on Instagram. What's his name? Sanchez or George Jimenez. George Jimenez. He does some really, really good stuff. I need to get back into this book. I dropped off on issue 7, so I got to pick up a couple of trades to catch up. But I need to get back into this because this art is insane, and some of the storytelling was really good in my opinion. So I'm looking forward to getting back into this somehow. As a matter of fact, let's see if this is a part 1. Excuse my drinking. Surprisingly, the melted ice hasn't really taken away from the strength of the coffee. I actually brewed 2.5 scoops this time because I put a little bit more water, so maybe it helped out. The 6th dimension storyline wraps up in this oversized issue as Superman faces down the World Force to save the Justice League. So this seems to be the end of an arc, which means 26 I can pick up. So you guys can expect in the future to see issue 26 on my pull list. Huge Shazam fan, though I got back into reading comics recently. After they already released this stuff, so maybe trade is what I'm going to pick this up in. I was excited for the Sandman universe stuff, but once again, I didn't get back into comics until after this stuff was already being established. So a lot of this stuff I'm missing. Green Lantern, not really going to be into. Young Justice will be something that I would like to read coming from Bendis, but in Wonder Comics, but too late to the game. So not going to be a thing for me. Going on to Image Comics, this will be coming out next week as well. So we have Birthright, something I'm not reading either. Cemetery Beach, not reading. Criminal, not reading. Die, something that I've seen some artwork for this. So maybe I'll pick up volume 1. I really like the artwork. I've heard great things about the story. Interested in it. Eclipse. Maybe drinks aren't the smartest thing for the show because I keep burping. Eclipse, I don't know anything about the story. I haven't heard much about it. Looks pretty interesting, but not necessarily interested in it. So Man Eater's coming out. We have Paper Girls coming out. Funny story with Paper Girls is I actually dropped off on issue 23, 24, 25, something like that. I'm about 4 issues behind, I would say. And no, I think 23. I think 24 was the last. 23 was the last issue I read. I'm on issue 24, and I cannot find issue 24 or 25 or 26. I think, or 24 and 25 in my comic book store. They just don't have it. So they start at 26, and I'm not gonna start reading at 26. Obviously, I need to get the entire story. So I'm behind on that as well. I'm gonna have to pick up trade, unfortunately, but I have the entire collection of trade anyway, so we'll see how that goes. Stray Bullets, I hear, is a solid book, but I'm way too far behind on, like, in terms of, like, I haven't read any of that. That's what I'm saying. So same for Walking Dead, great stuff, but I haven't read any of that stuff. I would love to get back in. I would love to get into that. A lot of this stuff is on Comixology. They do their unlimited subscription, and a lot of these books are up for unlimited, so that'd be interesting. Witchblade is something that I've heard great things about. Like the art, haven't read it, so I'm not going to really get into it. But Thumbs is a number 1 of 5 coming out, and this is already on my pull list, so I am going to be picking it up. It's a $5 cover price, which is something that I'm not excited about, but it is a mini series. I think it only goes 5 issues. Let me see if this is, they're all $4.99. Sucks, but the synopsis itself really interested me. Do they have the art here? I checked out some of the art. Here it is. Some of the art seems nice to me. It's very sort of different. There's a lot of comic booky type feel to it, which I appreciate. So I'm excited to see this. This seems to be like sort of like a post-apocalyptic technology-based thing, which sci-fi I like a lot. So sort of like not really post-apocalyptic, but near future type situation if things were to fall out a little bit. So excited for that. Anyways, that is what's on my pull for the week of June 5th. And that's going to be it for today's podcast, guys. I'm sorry if it's an underwhelming podcast. It's a bit weird for me to get back into this, into the podcast vibe, into the talking to the camera vibe. Even my throat doesn't appreciate it. It's just so much talking and just sort of sore right now. I hope that next week's or whenever the next podcast comes out, hope that one's a little bit more smoother. I'm going to work on the production stuff, try to get some more graphics done to improve the quality, hopefully improve the mic quality as well, and be a little bit more concise in terms of my reviews and not ramble so much. I felt myself rambling a little bit early on and being my own biggest critic in front of all you guys, but I like scripted stuff. So anyways, I was rambling on about the reviews, and I was saying a bunch of nothing until my mind caught up and realized what I was doing. But anyways, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you guys did, leave a like, comment. Let me know what you thought about the podcast. Let me know any ideas, any suggestions you may have. Also, your thoughts on the comics. I know some of you guys actually make your own videos, so let me know you make your own videos, and I'll follow you guys, subscribe, and interact with you guys. What are you pulling out next week on your pull list? And subscribe, obviously. Stick around for the next video because I think that one's going to be a fun one. Other than that, thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And like I said, I'm going to promise that the next one will be a lot better and hopefully much more concise and more conscious of your time. Anyways, thank you guys for being here. See you later.